Hi, this is Dr. Kurt Wohler for Functional Medicine Clinical Rounds. This is an example video of the type of information you could expect to receive through membership of the Functional Medicine Clinical Rounds website and program. This is a research article, would fall under the category of research article general information. So the title of this video is Aspergillus, Mold, Ochratoxin, and Autism. So mold or molds are fungi, and these are things that grow both in indoor and outdoor environments. And it's really not known exactly how many species of fungi there are. I mean, it could be anywhere between tens to hundreds of thousands throughout the world. Now, most of them grow in warm, damp, and humid conditions, although certain fungi can grow in more harsh, dry environments, like the southwest part of the United States with coccidioidomycosis. Now, molds spread and they actually reproduce through mold spores. So the one thing to keep in mind is that mold, like Aspergillus and Penicillium, fall under the biological group of organisms called fungi. Yeast are also fungi, so Candida is an example of a yeast. They're all fungi, but Aspergillus is a mold and Candida is a yeast. So you need to kind of look to keep those a bit separated when we're discussing these types of things with patients and clients. Aspergillus is the most common mold that all of us are exposed to. And some people get respiratory problems from Aspergillus just because of the mechanical effect of the spore irritating the lung tissue. But you can also get allergic type reactions in an IgE mediated allergy. And then we can also develop what's called an aspergilloma. This is where Aspergillus, for example, has actually colonized the lungs and is growing inside the lungs, causing problems. And then there's the mycotoxins. These molds, Aspergillus, Penicillium, Stachybotrys, for example, all produce mycotoxins, and these are chemicals that can have toxic effects. Unlike bacterial toxins, they're not really recognized by the immune system, but they can get into our cells, get into the nucleus of the cell, they can disrupt the DNA and RNA synthesis, it can lead to mitochondrial damage, they can deplete glutathione, for example, and so they can be definitely problematic. Now, there was a recent paper that came out in Nutritional Neuroscience that was looking at the presence of ochratoxin, a type of mycotoxin coming from Aspergillus, being linked to autism. And ochratoxin is a carcinogen. It can also damage the kidneys. It's also known to be an immune disruptor, so it actually can create problems in the immune system. One of the things that's often seen with ochratoxin is a proliferation of digestive candida, for example. So it's nephrotoxic, immunotoxic, as well as carcinogenic. It can also be a mycotoxin that is acquired through food. So contaminated foods like cereal grains, dairy products, because a cow has eaten grains that are contaminated with Aspergillus mold. The mycotoxin gets into the grain, it gets into the cow, and then it gets into our dairy products. Meat as well. Coffee is commonly contaminated with Aspergillus. One thing that's kind of interesting about ochratoxin is it can actually lower dopamine levels in the brain. So think about that clinically if you're working with a special needs child or maybe working with somebody with kind of a mental health or neurological problem. And what these researchers found was that there was a significant impact from their results of ochratoxin in the pathobiology of autism. Now, you watching this video, you may not be working with autistic individuals, but keep this in mind. It's very interesting. Ochratoxin competes with phenylalanine for the production of dopamine. So phenylalanine gets converted to tyrosine, gets converted to L-dopa, which gets converted to dopamine. What ochratoxin does is it inhibits phenylalanine hydroxylase the enzyme that actually converts phenylalanine into tyrosine. And then that will therefore impede the production of dopamine. So lower dopamine can affect attention, can affect mental focus. Dopamine also has a relationship to oxytocin, that pro-social hormone in the body. So in autism, that's a big problem because oftentimes there is a deficiency of oxytocin, which is what causes some of the social anxiety problems and social deficit issues seen in autism. Ochratoxin also interferes with neurodevelopment and disrupts the synapses between nerve cells. So it's going to interfere with the nerve cell communication in the brain. And that could explain some of the language problems, cognitive problems, memory issues seen in people. Now, it's always been known in autism that there is a 4-to-1 ratio of males to females with an autism diagnosis. Well, it turns out that males don't express some of the detoxification enzymes, these P450 enzymes that exist in the liver for the degradation of ochratoxin. So that could play a role in this whole 4-to-1 ratio scenario, male to female predominance in autism. Ochratoxin can disrupt other detoxifying enzymes. It can lead to leaky gut. When we have leaky gut, we start to get things that move through the lining of the digestive tract and trigger inflammation. One of the interesting things is if you actually look at the architecture of the tight junction in the digestive system, it's very similar to the tight junction of the blood-brain barrier. So many people who have chronic leaky gut sometimes can also start to have a leaky blood-brain barrier, which leads now to neurological inflammation. Also, leaky gut increases the sensitivity to food and food sensitivity issues, which is a big problem in autism. Now, lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, things that we commonly get through our diet or probiotics, can have some neutralizing capacity on ochratoxin. But oftentimes, a probiotic is not typically enough. It might be helpful, but people are being exposed to a lot of these toxins, and it's not, the probiotic isn't enough to take care of the mycotoxin all by itself. So other things need to be done, whether that's figuring out the source of the mold, using different kinds of binders, or sometimes using different antifungal remedies to deal with a mold overgrowth that might be actually occurring in the digestive system. Great Plains Laboratory has a mycotox profile. This is a urine profile. And the current version is it looks at 11 different mycotoxins from a number of different mold. So it looks at Aspergillus, Penicillium, something called Fusarium mold, Stachybotrys, for example. One of the other mycotoxins that you'll often see on the mycotox profile is this mycophenolic, which comes from Penicillium mold. These two examples below, where it says tartaric, arabinose, and carboxycitric, these are actually taken from an organic acid test. And we can see that there's a major yeast overgrowth. Arabinose is indicating invasive candida. And then the screenshot below that is Clostridia. And there's a wide variety of clostridial bacteria that produce different toxins that not only affect the gut, but also affect the brain and nervous system. So in the presence of mycophenolic mycotoxin, we can have an increased amount of candida and an increased amount of bacterial problems linked to Clostridia. Mycophenolic also being linked to Penicillium mold, okay? Penicillium mold is another kind of common mold, similar to Aspergillus. It can come from water-damaged building material, whether that's in the home or the office or the school. Penicillium mold is also that bluish-green mold that you see growing on fruit, for example, like an orange or grapefruit. Other mycotoxins like gliotoxin, which comes from ochratoxin. Gliotoxin is a known inhibitor of mitochondrial activity. The organic acid test under the glycolytic metabolites and the Krebs cycle metabolites are often elevated in the presence of mycotoxins. So we know that mycotoxins can lead to mitochondrial dysfunction, a very common problem in autism. Aspergillus mold is also a producer of oxalic acid, or what's also called oxalate. So people who have oxalate issues, another common problem in autism, should be assessed for mold exposure, and the mycotoxin profile complements a lot of the information we see on the organic acids test from Great Plains Lab. So the two tests actually go very well together, the organic acid test as well as the mycotox profile. A lot of information can be obtained about metabolic imbalances, as well as the metabolic imbalances that could be occurring because of mycotoxin exposure. So if you have any questions about this video, you can make sure to reach out to us through the Functional Medicine Clinical Rounds lab review service, as well as the member forum for ongoing questions about this material or other material obtained through the Functional Medicine Clinical Rounds site. Again, I'm Dr. Kurt Wohler for Functional Medicine Clinical Rounds. Thank you.